Today's guest is Amanda Eamich. She's a Senior Director of Business Development at ICF and a former civil servant. In fact, we worked together many, many years ago. Thanks for joining me today, Amanda.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So for those who have not met you or had a chance to talk to you, share a bit about your background, where you're from, who you are, and what you do.
Yeah, I'm what seems to be a rarity around here. I'm local to the area. I grew up in Loudoun County, Virginia, not too far from here. And I think because of that, my dad retired from Loudoun County Social Services and was a civil servant his entire career. And so I knew early on that I wanted to be working in and around government. Wasn't exactly sure what that would look like, but I had that as an inspiration and model as I was going through my youth. And besides the professional gig, I've got two little girls that challenge me in every single way and make me think about, the kind of work that I do and making more of an impact.
Wow. So, all right. So that's awesome. You're right. I don't meet very many people who are originally from this area. I'm not originally from the area, and there's a lot of people that we run into who aren't. As you were graduating high school and thinking about education, what did that look like for you?
Like I said, I knew I wanted to be in and around government, so I wasn't really keen to leave the area as a lot of my other friends growing up were. But I went into a government international politics program at George Mason, did a lot of great coursework around conflict resolution, and ultimately minored in business as well. And I thought I wanted to do some sort of communications or, some sort of foreign service office, but it turns out I'm not great at languages, so that didn't really pan out. But I got a great early career. It was a student career experience program, I think, through FSIS, Food Safety Inspection Service, where I got to get into a civil servant role on the GS scale in the communications office. It was, a 777, jackpot for me. But I didn't know a lot about the mission, and I figured, I'll just kind of get my GS rating and then maybe move on from there. But as it happens, the mission is just so incredible that I ended up staying for a long time.
Yeah, there's many people who probably never heard of FSIS. They should have. Yes. It impacts their lives every day. But I'll mention it briefly. Food Safety Inspection Service at USDA, where we both worked, is so incredibly important because they have the food, the meat safety mission in America. Mm-hmm. And it was a privilege to work at that agency.
Yeah, absolutely.
So then what was the decision factor for moving on from FSIS?
So I was at FSIS for a number of years, and then this feels weird to say, but social media became a thing that you could actually do professionally. And so, I had great leadership at FSIS who supported the concept of doing a pilot project for the first Twitter account, which again, seems weird to say out loud, and convince the general counsel and the CIO that this was something we could try out. And around that time, the Obama administration was coming in, and they put in these directors of new media in the cabinet agencies. And so seeing that need, the folks in the Office of Communications supporting the Department of Agriculture's kind of secretary's office, I had the opportunity to move into that level at the department as the director of web communications, where that's when I really started to push into the kind of more technology driven, a lot of open data and those types of things, working across the entire USDA portfolio that I think really kicked off the rest of my career, as it were, of being a dot connector and working at the intersection of a lot of these different places. But after 10 years total at USDA, both FSIS and the Office of Communications, I decided I wanted to try something new and kind of push from the other side, as it were. And went into a small business that focused a lot on the creative kind of front end, big Drupal shop, and built out a marketing and strategy practice on the delivery side initially.
Oh, wow. That's very interesting. Mm-hmm. And how did that go? Was it exciting? I've worked at small companies, and they are like, you got to have the energy.
Yeah. So we were in 8A initially and graduated through that process. And over the time, I built a delivery team that included having an in-house media buying shop and, diversifying the kind of skills that we were bringing, which was really exciting. But I found myself in the thing I did not want to do, like business development and proposals. Just having been a civil servant, I had some negative experiences, we'll say, of industry folks kind of cold calling me and, just seeing me as a check that I didn't have. And so I didn't want to be in that space, but it was interesting in that it got to the point where I would see requirements coming down and my team would say, we've got to give this deliverable that's in the contract, but, we really should be doing X, Y, and Z. And so I was like, all right, well, the only way you can do this is if you are responding to these solicitations and kind of writing into the approach the way in which you would approach it to, solve the bigger challenges, if you will. And so that really began my trek more into a growth space that, again, it's interesting in looking in the rearview mirror, having the power of, reflection and perspective to see that that's what I've always been doing, and just bringing together these different parties, whether it's government and industry, technology and, strategy, front end, back end, whatever the case may be, and just trying to figure out what's the real challenge we're trying to solve here and what's the right combination of, technical services, platforms, or partners, whatever it is, to actually get after those big issues.
That is an interesting point. I've talked to a lot of people, and many talk about their time in government flavoring when they get into business development, right? If you've sat on the side you and I have, you get a feel for how poorly we articulate our requirements, number one, but also, what our genuine needs are. And so that when you're building your kind of proposal approach with that thought in mind, right, it's a big difference.
Yeah, definitely. And I have seen a good number of organizations in government kind of shifting the way that they're thinking about requirements and their partnership with industry. There's a lot of industry organizations as well that kind of bring the parties together. And I think just like anything, right, the more you talk to each other, figure out, what the language is or what are the pressures in, government delivery and programs, right? You're reporting up to Congress. You have all these different, things that you have to track. And on the industry side, there are different kinds of pressures. And so you may not be able to do anything about it initially, but even just having that awareness and having the conversation is a great first step.
So then you made the plunge into real business development, not just communications. How did that go?
It's good. It's a different kind of cycle. I do, the one thing that I miss, and not so much about communications generally, but more of civil servants, I miss being so close to the policy side, right? And I do like seeing things through. So on the business development or growth side, there's the cycle of, figuring out what's the ask, how do we meet it, responding to the solicitation. Maybe there's orals, which I do love when those are in play. But I do have a bit of that moment where, you win the work and you hand it off to the delivery team and it's like, but what's happening in there? But it's kind of on to the next one, which is good because you're building different kinds of relationships and you do get to kind of flex that problem solving, dot connecting, how might we approach this kind of question fresh every single time, which is exciting.
No, it's good to hear you mention that. I was always on delivery. When I worked in the consulting world before I came into government, I was always on delivery, on the customer site, producing the solutions, and never had a hand very often in the proposal piece of it, right? I just had to live with what we said we were going to do.
Mhm.
Although I would say more companies I've met have more of a melding of the minds between that,
Mhm.
right?
Yes.
They bring in the people who are going to end up doing delivery much earlier into that, which is very smart.
Mhm.
If I was to leave government at this point, I definitely would be doing that if I was proposing work.
Yeah, I mean, it really benefits all sides because there's, I never want to suggest something that isn't feasible,
Right.
right? Whether that's in terms of the size of the team you're able to provide. Like sometimes you have to make choices, right? And so if you say, okay, we have X amount of time, X amount of budget, these are the most important things. I want to hear from the folks who are on the ground, who are going to be carrying out that work to see what makes sense from a delivery perspective and how they might meet those needs rather than just, promising the moon.
No, we don't want that. We don't want that at all.
No, no.
And then I think, if I remember correctly, did are you participating with Act at all?
I am. I did the partners program in 2019. And I hope to be a chair or co-chair on one of those programs in the future.
Oh,
Uh,
you're talking the right person. I can get you on
yeah.
the associates program next year.
Oh, excellent. I mean, to the point of bringing together
Yeah.
industry and government, kind of forming those relationships, just so you understand the other perspective, and have some really honest and vulnerable conversations about the challenges you're facing, what you need, like creative problem solving, is just so important.
Yeah, totally agree.
Hmm.
So what's something as you've gone through your career that if somebody who's come to you and say, Amanda, you have the power to make a change, or maybe it's too much, maybe what you're going to suggest is too big for change, maybe it's we need to think about changing it, right? Start
Yeah.
considering how we might change it. What's something you've witnessed in your career that we should reconsider?
The really big one that you or I will certainly not solve, um, when you think about how budgets are formed and you think about congressional mandates, there's the saying of what gets measured gets done, right? Or something like that.
Mhm.
Um, a lot of times there are very well-intentioned kind of directives that come down to agencies that they then have to stand up programs, which then from an industry side turns into requirements that turn into contracts and so on and so forth. A lot of times it's not necessarily solving the right problem.
Mhm.
And so that requires a whole lot of effort from a whole lot of places to think about where are the dollars going and how will it be measured in terms of impact, right? Like that's the real goal, and the ability for government to shift to a longer tail outcome based model rather than what's the output, what can be put in a report and quantifiable numbers. Those things are important. I see it more as an and also than an either
Right.
or. But that's the big one in thinking about how dollars are flowed, what that translates into from program requirements and mandates, um, all the way through to industry.
That's a biggie, yeah. Especially
Mhm.
since I will say officially, right? Officially, agencies are planning their budgets 3 years in advance,
Yeah.
but yet
Mhm.
technology is changing faster than that.
Yeah.
Um,
And that's my more attainable one, though. I think to the point of having conversations across the table, if you will, and having the flexibility to change course, to admit when, hey, this great idea, these wonderful requirements, this technology we thought was the one, it's not any longer. And so let's pivot, learn
mm,
from what we did, and build on it rather than kind of dig into a path that's already been chosen. Um, I think figuring out a way to just chip away at the margins on those types of opportunities, we could make a really big impact.
that's a good point. And then I would also say the other side of the budgeting challenge, right? Which is we only have monies allocated on a yearly basis
Mm.
because that's the fiscal year, right? That's the annual appropriations. But some of these projects are just so much larger than a singular budget year, but we cannot commit that the money will happen in the follow-on years, which
Sure.
makes projects challenging, right? Like you said, then it becomes even more important to plan what's the most important things in case the money doesn't come through.
That's right. The prioritization is key, because if you take that realistic approach that, hey, we're not going to boil the ocean in this one scope of work, whatever the case may be, what is the most important thing? First things first, and if we get to the other pieces, tremendous. It's only upside, but not trying to do all of the things, in which case you may not do them well, but focus on those foundational elements. And then, once that's clear, you can make some really good progress.
Yeah, from a business development perspective, are you seeing government use any innovative ways of trying to get work out there?
Yeah, there are some that are doing, I really like the reverse industry days and like pitches. And there are some others that take a more of a small business innovation research, SIBR, technology transfer, and the different phased funding that's more performance based. So it's a short amount of time, smaller dollars, higher risk, usually to industry, but the reward for both sides is really powerful. And thinking about, can we prove out this concept? Does it work? Okay, now let's take it to that next level. And so, to your point, you're not on the hook for this really large, really long-term contract that may not be the thing that you need. You're able to have a more creative, delivery focused, right? Like, get a thing out into the world, see how users actually react and respond to it, iterate, and then you can make course corrections more easily when it's contained in that manner.
That's interesting. Yeah. And I love it. I love it when agencies think outside the box. They do like challenges, right? If you make your initial pitch, and if your pitch is picked, then you get some seed money and proof of concept. And I've seen that done a couple times at GSA. I think DoD's got some interesting things in their research areas. So I'm just curious.
The hard part for industry on that is, of course, maybe this is another thing, if I had my magic wand or my purple crayon, the award cycle. So if you've got this team who does the challenge, that's expected to be the team who's going to do the work, it's really hard to keep folks on the bench until there's an award. And so I think some of that just rationalization between government and industry, and some understanding of how each side works, because both are important, right? And figuring out how to move forward together in that way. I think also just more communication that's happening, besides just the procurement strategies, acquisition strategies, the conversations that we're able to have in the information exchange only makes the process better. So, I love the Mythbusters on contracting. There's 3 of them now.
Yep.
I'm always sending them to folks like, no, we can do this. Like, help us help you, and vice versa. And there's a lot that you can do within the very appropriate confines of procurement.
That's amazing. Yeah, well, that's a lot of fun, right? Finding ways for me as a government person, finding ways that I can get innovative in how I educate people about my requirement, the amount of information that we get to share up front, and do industry days, and every way we can to make sure that when we finally put our statement of work out there, that the proposals coming in are truly against what we're trying to achieve. That's the challenge, right? So we got to articulate our requirements well, and as you know, statements of work that we put out aren't always digestible. We gotta, because we have so many pages we're trying to do it in. Same thing for you, right? You have only so many pages you can write your proposal in. So the more of those interactions we have, like industry days, and I love orals. I love oral presentations, and I love giving oral presentations when I was doing when I was trying to win work, because you have that opportunity to share what you couldn't share on paper.
Yeah, I think it's that the human dimension is often what's missing from the process. When you can sit across a table or a Zoom or whatever it is these days, and have that kind of connection, that's that is what makes for more impactful business relationships and for delivery to citizens and all other customers that you have, is when you have the ability to do this type of thing. So the more we can do that, I think the better we will all be.
Agreed. So what's coming up in the new year for you?
Gosh, I mean, I'm a few months in at ICF, so there's still a ton of ground to cover. And for me, I love learning and connecting with people and seeing, what makes sense to, again, bring that intersection, that combination of things. I do. One of my personal goals is to serve on a board. There's some community organizations that I really love that are near and dear to me. And I have had the benefit of great mentors over the years and have been able to give back to some individuals, but I think providing that in a more professional capacity is something that I'm really looking forward to doing.
That would be very exciting.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Amanda, I thank you for coming on and sharing about your journey, and especially about things that we could change. I think you have some great ideas, and hopefully they happen.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. Appreciate the time.